going to find my product, my source, by looking at photographs of people in sweatshirts. It's just not.
Welcome to the Exploring Washington State podcast. Here's your host, Scott Cowan.
Welcome back to this episode of the Exploring Washington State podcast. My guest today is Rick Hastings with Liberty Ciderworks in Spokane. Rick, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Scott. It's wonderful to be here.
You say that now. No, just Rick, let's talk about Rick Hastings pre-Liberty. What's your backstory?
I grew up on the west side of Washington State in the Skagit Valley.
Okay.
Yeah, and for various reasons, family down there being one of the big reasons, I went to school at the University of Texas in Austin, and met my wife in Texas. She's a native Texan, but I have some growing up history in Texas too. I mean, I think I was 7 or 8 when we moved to Skagit Valley. But anyway, degrees in Texas. Wife found there. I drug her back because I love the Pacific Northwest. By the time we were ready to come back to Seattle, it felt like we were kind of priced out of the market, and didn't want to spend our lives behind a steering wheel commuting 30, 40 or longer minutes per day. And so, I having grown up there, you go, well, I don't know about the Spokane, but let's go check it out.
Okay. All right. I can relate to this.
Yeah. I graduated from the University of Texas with a degree in architecture. And so I came up, looking for that kind of job. And was kind of enchanted, amazed, frankly, by Spokane and its what was intact. I mean, the 60s, they were tearing everything down and creating freeways, and they couldn't, urban renewal, quote unquote, fast enough. But Spokane had somehow missed that train, and there were these beautiful, beautiful old buildings and a river, that just jaw-dropping river that was flowing right through the heart of downtown with the falls, and so many boxes you could check and say, what a wonderful city. But it just almost there. It just had so much potential. And so, big eyes, idealistic, fresh out of architecture school, maybe this is a hook. And it was. Found a good job here, and have been honored to be part of this community since then. Been involved in many things that I kind of enjoy talking about in other. It's a longer story, but I've had a part and a hand in helping Spokane reorient itself to the river, and keeping the falls at the centerpiece of the community. And there's a long, like I said, a big backstory there. But architecture for quite a while, and then the last decade or so in city planning and urban design.
So in architecture, what was your focus?
When I was at ALSC Architects and I think one other firm, mostly commercial stuff, schools. I helped with a tech company that was growing in Liberty Lake, and a few historic remodels in downtown. Some of the buildings that had been sort of laying fallow for a long time, and had the chance to repurpose them and create space for new businesses and new investment.
That's a simple process, isn't it? You don't, structural. I used to work for Starbucks Coffee in their corporate offices, and during the Nisqually quake, the building that we were in, which is the old Sears warehouse down in the Soto district, it just kind of split open in ways, and they were retrofitting it around us when we went back to work. And I was always shocked at how much effort it took to retrofit a 100-some-year-old building. They were built with different standards than we have today.
Right.
So, okay. Well, I think I read somewhere. Well, first off, let me ask you, go back to your wife. How were you able to convince her to leave Texas? Because Austin's a great city. I mean, I love music, so I have yet to get to Austin, and I must get to Austin, and I must go and watch and hear live music.
Yeah.
And then I have this romanticized notion that the barbecue will be just world class and amazing. So how did you convince a Texan to come up to the Pacific Northwest?
That's a good question. I don't know that to this date, I'm not sure I've convinced her.
Okay.
We go day to day, hanging by a thread.
Okay.
But when I graduated in 93, believe it or not, Austin was kind of an economic doldrums. There weren't a lot of good jobs to be had. And the Northwest, on the other hand, was popping. So, the job draw was a big part of it. But I know when I came up here, before we got serious about one another, I came up one day and just drove all around all my favorite places, mostly in the Skagit Valley at the time. Went up to Mount Baker, out to the San Juans, and I just took a zillion photographs. And I trotted those back, and that was part of my sales pitch to convince her to come up. It's an incredible state we live in. There's so much diversity, everything from rainforest to desert. I've grown to really love the Palouse country just south of here. And just so much to do and see. And if she was in the mood for flat and desert, we could check that box.
Okay.
Hill country, yeah. Lord knows we've got lots of forest land, so she's enjoying it for sure.
What does she miss, though? Has she ever said to you, I miss X? What does she miss, if anything?
Oh, I don't know. One thing that pops to mind immediately, I think we both miss it, is the real dramatic weather in Texas. They get the thunderstorms that just, like the finger of God, is just coming down on you. It's exciting as heck. I've witnessed, I think, 2 tornadoes with an eye shot, when I could see them, coming and going, and coming out of the clouds, in Texas. And the lightning storms are just, it's better than fireworks. I'll
take your word for that.
Yeah. That pops to mind first, but I think she's kind of a 2-season girl. She likes a little taste of winter, and then everything else needs to be warm. Whereas in Spokane, you get the full 4 seasons. It's never full on fall. It's kind of a touch of summer and a touch of winter, and it just kind of blends in. And then you have a winter, and yet a very long winter and a very long spring, and it's definitely 4 seasons here. It's a bit of a change that way for her too.
This last winter was rough. This last winter got to me. Wenatchee was. I kind of felt like Jack Nicholson in The Shining for a while. I just never left the house, and it was a tough winter for us here this year. And I know you guys got quite a bit of snow too. So, anyway. Well, so you moved to Spokane in 93. The city's obviously changed a lot in the decade since, and for the better. What got you started with cider? How did you? Yeah, what was the impetus for you getting involved in cider?
Mm-hmm. Well, I've always had hobbies of many stripes and types. One of them happened to be making beer. And I enjoyed doing that. I thought, well, I'll try again. But my brother and sister-in-law, about that time, both discovered they had celiac disease, and so gluten intolerant to an nth degree. And so the beer and pizza visits we used to have had turned into, well, what else? And so we found some imported cider, Blackthorn, I think it's called, and some of the imports from the UK. And I think we discovered we like them quite a bit, and those are gluten free. Mm-hmm. And so I was looking around, and actually I live now and then right next door to an urban winery, and I worked right next door to another urban winery, and so I knew these folks, and I thought, this would be a fun career to have someday. But here we are in, state of Washington, the apple state. We're known worldwide for our apples, and we may have 1,100, 1,200 or more nowadays wineries, as many breweries probably. But at the time, 12 years ago or so, we I think we were only a dozen cideries in the entire region. Why that disconnect when we're growing such great apples? I thought. And maybe I could do that as an urban cidery. And so experiments started from trips to the local orchard to have them sell me unpasteurized juice and little small batches in the basement. And and the hobby turned into serious passion, and now it's completely out of control.
Now it's out of control. Let me ask you, so when Liberty went commercial, when you flipped the switch from enthusiast to professional, how many cideries were there, do you think, in Washington State at that time?
Well, I would guess 2 dozen when we finally started.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. And how many do you think there are today?
In Washington State, I would guess 60.
Okay. And when you define a cidery, you're talking about somebody who's just making cider, not necessarily a winery that's got making a cider here or there. Are you?
I'm probably including those, but there's not very many wineries that are also making cider. There are a few. Okay. There are a few breweries that are making cider, right. But for the most part, the cideries that would make a list are exclusive to cider.
Okay. All right. So there's been a pretty, been a lot of growth in the number of cideries. So, since Liberty went. Okay.
Yeah, it's really taken off. I think regionally we're probably regionally I speak of the members of the Northwest Cider Association, which represents British Columbia, Idaho, Montana, Washington, and Oregon. I want to say there's maybe 150 or so, maybe a little bit more than that, members. And over and above the members, there are other cideries that just aren't members. So it's growing quite quickly now.
Okay. So if we go back to finding ciders to replace beer and pizza night, you mentioned Blackthorn, I think was the name that you mentioned. What was it about the cider that you were all finding interesting? What was it?
Well, for me, I mean, it's an approachable beverage. It's refreshing. And I appreciated how it could be expressive. You were really tasting the essence of the apple, and it wasn't sweet. It was dry. It was it seemed quaffable, sessionable, and just really complemented the food. Whatever we had seemed to have on the table that seemed to go well with. It didn't clash with. It didn't demand to be front and center. It was happy to be part of the meal, and it helped with everything. It was kind of a way to kind of tie the meal together.
Okay. When you first started making your own at home for fun, I always love to ask, mistakes, failures, but when you first started, did everything go smoothly, or did you was there a learning curve? You're already a home brewer, so you kind of have some of the familiarity with certain things. How was the first batch of cider? Do you remember?
I do. In fact, I think I still maybe have a bottle or two down in the basement.
Oh my gosh. Okay.
I don't think it's drinkable now, but it's sort of there gathering dust, and I look upon it from time to time to think, in the day.
Okay.
No, the first batch went pretty smoothly. I really didn't have too much trouble. Cider can be incredibly simple to make. if you're using just a commercial yeast and just some juice, and throw that yeast at that juice, and make sure you've got things relatively clean, put a cap on it. It'll take off and it'll ferment to dry, and it may not be very interesting, but if you've at least dealt with the cleanliness thing and made sure to prep the juice properly, it turns out just fine. And so mine did too. I just didn't, I enjoyed it a lot, but I quickly learned that it can be a whole lot better if you start with really good apples. It's like, your first, if you tried to make your first batch of wine with Concord grapes or Thompson seedless grapes, well, yeah, you could have wine, and you might enjoy it. It might actually be quite enjoyable for, I don't know, but we know that Merlot grapes and grapes that are grown specifically for wine make a world of difference in what expresses in the glass. And I've, not knowing it at the outset, but I learned fairly quickly that there are apples that are grown exactly in the same way. They don't necessarily taste good off the tree, but they're not supposed to. They're supposed to be pressed and made into cider. And then they shine, and really it sets it's a whole nother level when you move to a cider specific apple than say Fuji.
So your first batch, what apples? Do you remember what apples you used your first time?
I don't. I think I went to there's a area in Spokane called Green Bluff where there's a lot of orchards still up there. It's kind of a ecotourism kind of place now.
Right.
But I'm guessing it was probably Brayburn and I don't know, Fuji's and maybe some Granny Smiths thrown in, the things that you would pick and eat from a you-pick orchard.
Right.
Hanson's Orchards, where I got them, is, for the record.
More like a dessert apple, if you will.
Absolutely. Yeah, that's kind of what they're called, dessert apples. And
so you quickly learned then that there are, better apples for cider. Where did you start sourcing those from? Because those aren't typically available at your local U-Pick.
No, they're not. And that's when I started going, hat in hand to the cideries that were open, kind of becoming a cider groupie and showing up at harvest and going, wow, can I help? I'll help you with this or help you with that. Maybe I'll help for a bottling, or can I just buy some extra juice from you? And in that mode, I think the folks I got most of my juice from that really made a huge difference for me was from Snowdrift Cider in East Wenatchee. Peter Ringsrud, I think you interviewed him once a while back. Super nice guy, wonderful family, and they were so kind to share, 5 gallons of this and 5 gallons of that for about 2 or 3 years, where I took them back and froze some and a 5-gallon batch in my basement and sequentially did that, and then entered the results in international competitions or national competitions, and was getting good results. And so starting out with the help of the Ringsrud at Snowdrift.
Peter's a very nice guy. I sat down with him and talked to him. Our interview that I sat with him was actually next to their tasting room while the tractors are going around, working orchard. That was kind of interesting, but his name has popped up with other cider makers too, as being someone who has been helpful. Mm-hmm. So what? Okay, so we started off because you were trying to find something gluten-free. You expand that into a little bit more like, this is kind of fun. I like doing this. I'm having results with this. When did the idea that, hey, this is a business come to mind?
Well, I think I mentioned my proximity to urban wineries. And so the seed was kind of planted in my head that it looks, the winery right next door to us, it's behind the brick wall where I'm sitting here, literally, is Barrister Winery. And there are a couple of attorneys, that gave up. One gave up his career. He was kind of tired of practicing law and took up wine. But I thought, I don't know that I want to be behind a computer screen, clicking away at a mouse for the rest of my life. And so at some point I would like to transition into something like that. And so this urban cidery, when cider came to the picture, that it fit really neatly into the mold of an urban beverage company. And so I was always kind of hoping this was the way it would go. And as I, started out making in the basement and reading every book I could lay my hands on and talking to cider makers I could speak with, that led to taking coursework from a gentleman named Peter Mitchell, who comes over from the UK. At the time, anyway, I don't think he comes over anymore, but at the time he came and taught cider making, a week-long course in cider making at Cornell in New York State and in Mount Vernon, Washington. As coincidentally where I grew up, and so I had free room and board there, and I ended up signing up and taking that coursework. And you spend $1,000 I think to take that course at the time. I'm taking vacation time off to do it. Yeah, you kind of feel like you've made a commitment, and it's maybe time to start thinking, fish or cut bait on this. And yeah, so that's kind of how that was kind of the tipping point when I realized things were pretty darn serious.
Okay. I've never met your wife. I've only talked to you just briefly, but has your wife been supportive?
Yeah, for sure.
Okay.
Skeptical at first, but
okay.
But very generous and letting this passion of mine run its course. And it's led to really wonderful things. We've had many trips, got to know many people. There's lots of reasons. I think a lot of vocations will do this for you, but cider is definitely one of them. That you can use it as a means to see the world, a set of lenses, as it were, that leads you to meet people that grow your apples, or press your apples, or they're also in the industry. Or that you're, visiting a place in the world that's, famous for apples. I don't know. We've had some adventures, and she's been very supportive. Yeah.
Well, let me ask you this question. So, what was it like when you came home and said, "I think I want to go take a class in Mount Vernon while I'm on vacation, and it's going to cost maybe $1,000"? Did she look at you like you were crazy, or was she supportive of the idea?
Supportive of the idea, but only because the topic I think it seemed to be inevitable. You kind of see it coming. Okay. By that time.
So she just resigned herself and said, "All right, go."
Right.
Okay.
Right.
Okay. So how did you come up with the name Liberty Ciderworks?
Well, okay. My business partner at the time, another architect, I think he and I were casting around for names for a good long time. As it turned out, Liberty, there's an apple called Liberty. It was an apple I was using quite a bit, that we were getting from the orchard, one of the orchards we still work with.
Okay.
And so that the apple name was like, okay, maybe it's an apple name that the cideries adapts to. But then we thought, well, okay, why Liberty? Well, we could say we maybe could build the brand a little bit around the word Liberty seems to have ties to colonial America, Patrick Henry, all that stuff. That happens to be the heyday of cider in North America. And so there's a lot of interesting history, that we could, latch on to with the name, perhaps. So it has maybe a marketing hook. And then I think the final turn was we realized that he and I both worked at the same architecture firm in a building called Liberty, the Liberty Building in downtown Spokane. Auntie's bookstore is still there, and the architecture firm we worked with at the same time is still there too. So it's like, 1, 2, 3, okay, let's go.
Okay. There you go.
Yeah.
And when you first started, what was your first commercial product? And don't say cider. I mean, what was the first commercial variety you were selling?
We had maybe three that we kind of got out of the gate with, and one of them comes to mind. First off, it was called New World. It was a blend, and it was a blend that was intended to evoke a cider that was made predominantly with cider apples, but it was a blend that was dessert apples, but blended with crab apples. That we were able to get our hands on. And we couldn't get some of these English or UK or French varietals, or not very many of them anyway. But how do you approximate that versus just doing a straight up dessert fruit and adding sugar or adding things to? How do you come up with something that's as interesting, or at least in the same ballpark as one that was, began with Dabinet apple, let's say. And so New World was a blend of, like I said, dessert apples. I think it was Liberty, Empire, Macintosh, and Cortland, with Manchurian crab apples, little tiny apple that was just really, really intensely flavored and full of tannins, lots of acidity, and in maybe 10% blend. It made a world of difference and made that cider taste almost as good as a full tilt cider made with cider-specific apples. So that was one of the ones we started with. We also had another one that was, limited quantities. We just called it English style, which it was intended to approximate a West Country style cider, which is typical in the southern UK. We could get a few Dabinets and Chisel Jerseys and Brown's apples and some of those, and it was a blend. And we also had to blend it back with some dessert apples to make it commercially viable. But that was another one that we started out with.
Okay. When we talked on the phone, and I'm looking at your website over here, and right now I'm looking at a headline that says "Inspired by there, but made like here." You had mentioned that you take great pride in sourcing your apples locally, and you're using what is available in your area versus importing apples from, say, New York.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, for sure.
When was that decision made? How did that come about? Well,
I think it could be just a pragmatic decision, and on some level, maybe it was. It's crazy to continue to try and get in our area. I'll use an example. There's an apple called Yarlington Mill. Love that apple. Makes a fantastic cider. One of my favorite ciders in the world, Oliver's cider, in the UK, uses a lot of Yarlington Mill, but they are really susceptible to a viral issue called fire blight in our area. And so it'd just be crazy to try and grow not just Yarlington Mill, but many other types of apples that are susceptible to fire blight, or that maybe really only shine if it's, say, a marine climate. Now, Spokane's not a marine climate. Spokane is semi-arid, and we have long winters. And so not every apple will thrive here. And I guess you just try and be insistent on sticking with those apples that from having drunk cider in the UK, but why try to shoehorn those apples into your area? I think their apples are incredibly adaptive, and they're going to be varieties that will just almost grow themselves wherever you are in the world. And so let's figure out which apples those are that grow beautifully and express our area and express, our climate, that also happen to be really, really good for cider. And there are many varieties that are just that way. We have to find out the hard way because there's just not much experience to go around in what grows well in the Palouse. I think there's only one or two orchards in that area, maybe that ever have been. It's wheat country. It could be and should be apple country too, but anyway, you find out by planting and seeing what happens. Maybe you definitely kind of do your research and talk to lots and lots and lots of people before you spend the money to put something in the ground. But that's one reason. It's just being pragmatic. But then there's the more lyrical reason that, to be able to talk about what's in the glass. This is something that represents an apple or apples that we found to grow beautifully, and maybe better than anywhere else that we've encountered, maybe better than anywhere else in the world. They seem to belong here. And so that is a story about us. That's a story that's unique to us, and it becomes part of the story that our brand tries to express.
Well, give me an example of an apple that you feel grows well and maybe better in northeastern Washington.
Well, too, I'll mention McIntosh. That is, it's a dessert apple, but it is also more properly, I think, classified as an heirloom apple, which means it is at multi-purpose. It's great for cooking and culinary use, but also for cider. It's not. It doesn't have the tannins that we typically associate with a complex cider-specific apple, but it tends to the fruity esters that don't seem to ferment away. They're left in the glass at the end of a fermentation, give it just an amazing fruitiness and a full-bodied character to it that belies the fact that it may be very, very dry. It still tastes sweet somehow. It still tastes fruity somehow. Now, a Mac from the East Coast, so I'm told. I mean, there's many cider makers that I have deep respect for won't even touch a McIntosh because it just doesn't finish that way in a glass. Now, there are many other places that maybe it does, but the apples, the McIntosh apples that grow in the Palouse and in our region, I'll also mention in Montana, just over the border from us, grow amazing McIntosh apples too. But I found them to be, really world class. There's something about the Macs, something about this area that Macs just seem to love, and so if you look around for I don't know. Anyway, they're amazing. The Macs are just better than anything I've encountered anywhere. The other one that I'll bring up is Golden Russet. That's an American cider apple, and it grows well in other parts of the country too. But I was just at a conference in Virginia, and I was able to taste various Golden Russet apples from over there, and you could tell that it was Golden Russet. You're swirling it in the glass. That smells like a Golden Russet. Yeah, I'm getting some Golden Russet character and flavor. But it's just dialed back. It's just not as acute. It's just not as wonderful as the Golden Russets we're able to get and grow here. Ours almost have to be blended back because they are so over the top. The characteristics are almost too much, but that's the flavor in the glass. But the Golden Russets that are grown for us by one of our partner Richards, Topcliffe in Prosser, that's wine country, and I don't know that anyone's really thought to grow apples in wine. Well, with sort of that mindset, and that's the way he does. Right. In fact, all our orchards do that. They're not growing apples to ever be sold on the grocery store shelf or to be wholesaled out, even though they might be able to. They're growing them like wine grapes. They're, not trying to get them big, not trying to get them pretty, not trying to get them to march to a certain tune. They're not picking them early. But his Golden Russets come with sugar levels that are they're just off the charts. The sugar levels we get in the Golden Russets from Bill at Topcliffe would yield, and typically do yield, something in the neighborhood of 12.5% alcohol. With residual sugar, it's not like the yeast just gives up that we use. The yeast just kind of stops working, and we're left with a nicely balanced, some residual sugar, and still almost too much alcohol. And that's owing to our climate. That's owing to the amount of sunshine we get and the really cold, the heat cycles. Cold at night, warm in the day, cold at night, warm in the day. Those things help The trees produce sugar. And so it's kind of exciting to be able to discover what apples can do in our area if you're growing them deliberately for cider and not for the grocery store.
I want to confirm something. Liberty Ciderworks, you do not have an orchard where you're raising apples, correct? You source all your apples?
Yes. Yeah.
Okay.
I mean, I'd love to. I hope someday to have my own orchard, but right now, I'm really glad I don't, because it is a full-time job and then some. Just making cider and running the business. To have an orchard to have to worry about too. My hat's off to any and all that do both.
Okay. So through the years, you jokingly said earlier on you were a cider groupie, and you'd go around and offer to help and in return for an opportunity to take some apples back or some juice back with you. How did you go about developing the relationships with the orchards? I mean, same sort of thing, literally going and knocking on the door of these people, or did you ask them to plant trees that would meet your needs? Or how did we get to where we are today?
Well, so far it's been kismet. The orchard we work with and get most of our apples from is Bishop's Orchard in Garfield, Washington. Steve and Sally Bishop, as it turned out, both took the Peter Mitchell class, because I know at one point they wanted to make hard cider as well. And they're the orchardists, but they thought, well, we've got all these apples, let's make cider too. They ended up taking the Peter Mitchell class in Cornell. And I had finished my coursework here in Mount Vernon and was, I think, working on my database, and all the people that I knew had met, and so who took the class at Cornell? And I think I stumbled upon a slideshow of the students at the Cornell class, and there was this one guy sitting in the in the photograph. There's this one guy with his sweatshirt on that says Bishop's Orchard, Garfield, Washington on it. And so it was just that chance photograph that I happened to see, and was attentive enough to see what was on his sweatshirt. And then Google, phone call. You don't know me, but and so it began. Yeah.
Okay. What apples are they raising or growing? Raising?
Well, so they're the ones that provide our Macintosh apples. We're not using too many of their dessert apples anymore. I mentioned Cortland and Liberty and some others too, but they still grow those. But we're kind of using just the Macs. But they also have most of our we call them English apples, but they're cider specific apples. We get all of most of those, I should say, from the Bishop's Orchard too. So they have a section of the orchard that's set aside just for the apples they grow for us, that include Dabinet and Kingston Black and Chisel Jersey and Brown's Apple and Philabarrel, and I'm sure there's 3 or 4 others that I'm missing, but you get the gist of it.
Right. So it was just random luck, if you will.
Yeah.
A photograph with a sweatshirt on.
Right.
That's not something you can put into a business plan.
No.
I'm going to find my product, my source, by looking at photographs of people in sweatshirts. This is not. You sat down with your banker and said, "Hey, this is my business plan," and they're going to throw you out. I mean, it's just over.
Right.
Conversation's dead.
Right. I mentioned Topcliffe Farms in Prosser. They're another big supplier of ours. Bill Howell is the orchardist there. He and Lynette. He too, I think, wanted to be a cider maker, and he was actually in my Peter Mitchell class. There were 2 of them, actually. Peter Mitchell classes 1 and 2, but he was in the second one, and so I got to know him a little bit there. And so when we discovered, when he discovered, I think, that he didn't really want to get into the cider biz either, it was an easy thing to say, look, you've got some great apples going here. How about Liberty just buys them from you? And so that's another big source. And so it's just luck.
Okay.
We would have hunted people down, I think, regardless, but I was really fortunate. We've been incredibly fortunate to just have found people that already had these amazing apples in the ground and a mindset that was attuned to cider and not really focused on yield, pounds per acre. How much can I get on this in the wholesale market? And there's these troublesome dudes that show up want to buy apples for us to use for cider. No, these people are already sympathetic to and appreciative of what we're trying to do.
I'm looking on your website at you have like a graph. I'm looking at Porter's Perfection, and you have a graph, like a tasting or like a flavor wheel maybe, or I don't know that I've ever seen anybody just display their product like this. So I'm a little awkward here in this because I'm looking at this going, wow, this is really quite interesting. How'd you determine to start displaying your, I know this is bad radio, if you will, but I'm reading, and let me just read this. So what I'm looking at is your Porter's Perfection 2.22. You give a brief description of what it is. Then you describe the vintage, the number of volume that you've made, how you've conditioned it, the varietals used, origin, process notes, and then you have this chart. Walk me through that, please.
Well, cider is so new to most people. It's getting less new. I mean, people are getting used to the notion of it. But there's still a big learning curve ahead. And we've always thought of our tasting room, and part of our mission is to educate people about cider in whatever way we can. And there's one way, I think, is to give people information about what we've done and how we've done it and what's in it, and what the process was, what's the story behind it. How did we ferment it? What did it spend time in a barrel? Yes or no? How much time? Tell me about what's in this glass here. What about those apples? What's a dabinet, right? And so that kind of information is just always useful and compelling to a lot of folks. And as they become, as they transition from newbies to cider heads, then they're really appreciative of that information. So, I'm learning about all this myself as we go through, learning about the charms and foliables, I suppose, of different apples, and so we're on this journey together. So, for our club and for our special ciders, I think all our ciders we have spider charts on, but especially I think starting out with the club, we wanted to give people a takeaway with their quarterly trio of bottles that went into that kind of detail. Okay. And so, yes, that chart that you're talking about is just one way of, helping record and document what typically presents in the glass. Of course, it's my palate. It's maybe my wife Charlotte's palate. Maybe one of my partners when we get around and talk about these things. What are you tasting? But I think it opens the door to appreciating what cider is and can be by, at least touching on some of the big categories of flavor and or aromatic experiences you're likely to have. Is it fruity? Well, okay, yes, but what kind of fruit? Is it stone fruit? Is it like a palm fruit more, or is it tropical? Some of these broad categories are really helpful in that, yes, you can taste in some ciders it's a tropical note. Okay, we start there. Well, what kind of tropical? Is it banana? Is it these various categories of fruit that then as you're sipping and swirling and savoring this thing, you begin to tease out these specifics that otherwise may not just leap off your tongue. We're not all sommeliers, and so it gives you a chance to again enjoy what you've got. If you want to take the time and sort of get nerdy with it, you can. I encourage people to go through this exercise of kind of rating a 1 through 5 for all of these different categories that we have on our little wheel. And then you connect the dots and make a little spider chart. It helps document what we've done, and we can look back on 5 or 10 years from now and see maybe if the Dabinet is changing a bit, or if we're kind of finding out what it is Dabinets will and always seem to express in our area with our Dabinets, with our process.
Okay. So I'm on your shopping cart now, and I'm saying this tongue-in-cheek, firmly planted. I'm not seeing any infused with jalapeno or, these are more fine ciders versus, I don't know, what's the other word I want to use, but versus, help me out here. I'm struggling. But mass market,
commodity,
commodity. Okay, all right. And I'm looking through here, and you are presenting it in a manner very similar to me how wine is presented when I look at a wine. If I'm online looking at wine, and you've got a number of varieties here. We don't have time to talk about them all. But what can you highlight? What are you really exceptionally proud of right now that's available to the public?
They're all like my children. I love them all.
I know
it depends on what I'm in the mood for, what I'll reach for. But I'm really enjoying the Brown's apple right now. It's an English cider varietal that seems to really just thrives in the Palouse. It is not as sharp and acidic as the Browns are in other parts of the world. It's a softer. They're usually used to blend with. They're called the bitter sharp for a reason. They've got a lot of tannins, so the bitter. That's where the word bitter comes, so it's what it relates to. And then the sharp is the malic acid. This one is not that sharp, and it does have a lovely tannin level character and a really intense fruitiness. So that's one. That's one also where the native yeast that we use, which is another thing that I think sets us apart from 95% of the cideries in the region. Not the world, because all cideries in France and Spain, and most cideries in the UK use natural yeast too, but that's what we do. And so this natural yeast that's on the apples, that's part of the microculture in the orchard that comes to our place in the juice and then ferments the cider, seems to marry incredibly well with this apple. There's just a lovely amount of residual sugar in that Browns that helps balance out some of that acidity. It gives it an amazing fruitiness, but there's also depth of character. It's just not a one note. There's several notes going on. It's a lovely thing in the glass and relatively low alcohol. So it's quaffable and enjoyable. That's one for sure. Kingston Black is another one. That's one we won a Good Food Award with what's this year. We entered it last year, but that's an incredible honor. That's a national award, and it's not just that. Their criteria include a lot of specific questioning to ensure that the kind of apples that we're growing are sustainable, that we have good practices that are sort of a slow food movement ethos. And so we've been able to aver to those things, and both in the way that our apples are grown and the way they're responsibly managed and all of that stuff. And then, you get something wonderful in the glass. Kingston Black is another UK cider varietal. If you would ask 10 cider makers what their favorite cider apple is, I think 9 of them would say Kingston Black. And so this one turned out really well.
That's a question I was going to ask you.
Yeah.
I was going to ask you, I'm going to make you pick one apple, the only apple you can work with for the rest of your career. I know it's a terrible question for you. I know it, but I just started asking this one, so I haven't asked it to everybody. But I'm going to make you pick one apple you can work with the rest of your career.
God, that's cruel.
I know.
I don't know. Kingston Black is so hard to grow. I think I'd be pulling my hair out just trying to get those apples on a regular basis. So as much as I love that apple, I'd set that one aside. I would say, Liberty and our approach is to try and coax the very, very best out of American apples that we can. And so maybe, I'll be bold and say I'll take off those UK cider varietals that I love and pick an American apple. And then if I narrow it down that way, I'm left with 2, Golden Russet, which I think is just amazing, and then Wixon Crabapple, which I was sort of on the fence about for a long time until we got our hands on the ones that Bill Howell grows. And we're about to bottle that. In fact, after I hang up, I'm going to go bottle a big tank of it. It is just phenomenal. And I think it's super approachable. It's an American apple that was cultivated and created by a gentleman named Albert Etcher. I think it was first brought into the world in, say, the 30s in Northern California. But since I don't actually have to hold to this promise, I'll say Wixon Crabapple.
Okay. All right. And I know that was a terrible question.
Yeah, it's pretty mean.
But it's still kind of fun to watch people squirm as they work it through.
Mm-hmm.
I'm looking at your Raven Oak, and another guest that we'd had on previously was Dry Fly Distilling, and so I see that you're working with them as far as their barrels go. Have you been to their new distillery?
Just once, yeah. Yeah, we went and picked up some barrels there recently. It's pretty impressive.
It's kind of jaw dropping when you're like, oh my gosh. So what is the barrel? Help me out here. So when you age this in a barrel, what are you noticing comes out? What are you extracting from the wood? How does that help with the finish?
Well, for that one product, we're really trying to marry the character of what had been in the barrel before, i.e. whiskey, with a blend of apples that seem to really harmonize with that. And so in that case, we are, definitely bringing that whiskey character onto the stage. And again, finding an apple that just seems to work well with that. And that's what Raven Oak is. And so the whiskey barrels we get from Dry Fly for that particular product, that first time that cider gets that and spends 3-6 months in there, we're trying to get that whiskey flavor developed, or that marriage of those flavors developed. Subsequently, though, when that barrel has been used once, we'll use it again and again and again, and it becomes more and more neutral. And so we end up with, a bunch of barrels that started out life as Dry Fly whiskey barrels, but now they're neutral French oak. And we'll age many of our ciders in those, not trying to draw whiskey notes out of, but really trying to capitalize on the things that you can get when you put a fermented beverage in oak, which is some oakiness, yes, but also micro-oxygenation that happens that helps marry the flavors and smooths the product out over time. Those things that you do with wine. Cider is really just wine made with apples. The exact same methodology, and at least the way we approach it, the same sort of mindset and intent, trying to coax the most flavor out of those things that have been doted on by these orchardists that are just, it's their passion, it's their love. It's the reason they get up at 2 a.m. at night to try and check on these apples to make sure they're going to be okay, because maybe there's a cold snap coming through. They put as much love and care into these things as we put into the cider, and we've got to honor that.
Your tasting room, when is it open? Let's talk about that for a little bit.
Well, we used to be Wednesday through Sunday. We're Thursday through Sunday now, post-COVID. We might pop back open on Wednesday soon. But it's Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday, evenings from 4 p.m. to 9 p.m., and Sunday, I'm in the tap room on Sunday from 2 to 6.
Okay.
Yeah, and so it's people pop in, and we've got lots and lots of regulars. lots enough people that pop through that maybe here for a convention from the Midwest. What do they think of when they think of Washington State? Apples. Is there a cider nearby? Well, the Google map says Liberty's a couple blocks away. So we get a lot of those folks too.
Yeah. Okay. Before we hit record, you have some exciting news, I guess. I mean, I don't know if it's exciting. I mean, you're closing on a building?
Yeah, it's very exciting for us. We are it's like working on a yacht. You're working on a ship.
Okay.
You have to. Everything's floor to ceiling, everywhere you look, and that's the way we've had to operate for way too long. But we are closing on a building and a property next week, not too far from where we're at, and it's like 3 times the size and about the same lease rate. Yeah, we get to expand. We're gonna. I think we're working towards about tripling our output in the next year or two. So new fermenters, new equipment, and a whole lot of stuff that's happening. And I get to take my degree back out off the shelf and design the space. And it's going to be a lot of fun. But it's going to be a busy year.
Well, it's easy to build out a building. It's not very, that's not a lot of work. You just buy the stuff, throw it in, and it works, right? There's no, come on.
Yeah. We're lucky. We, it's an entity created to purchase the building that includes my former partner, who's, like I mentioned, he's an architect. He's still at the helm of his firm. It's a design build architecture firm. And we were able to secure this building because they're going to take the second floor of the building we're going to occupy. And so they're actually going to do a lot of the heavy lifting. They're going to be the contractor. And they've got people that can, in this day and age, you want to get anything done, it's going to take 2 or 3 times the amount of time and 2 or 3 times the amount of money. I don't know about the money part, but at least the schedule part, we're going to be able to attack because we have insiders going to help us build this thing out fairly quickly. Okay. Yeah, and so that's been a good thing too, and we'll have that little bit of dynamic with a little business above us.
So when do you optimistically hope to flip the switch and be open in your new facility?
Optimistically, December.
That's probably as hard of a question as asking what apple you can pick with. But do you have an optimistic timeline?
Yeah, our target is January of next year. So
that's
we
great.
have about 6 months or so, 7 months.
That's a pretty aggressive timeline.
It really is. I didn't think it was likely to happen, but the loan entity gave us 6 months, and then after you kind of recover from hearing that, you think, well, we do have this dynamic where the design build firm is going to, is definitely motivated to help us get this done quickly. They're going to pull strings, and you call in favors and get people to come in and finish it out. We'll see. It may take longer, probably will, but you said optimistically, so I said January.
All right. So when, because you've got all this free time on your hands, what do you and your wife, what do you guys like to do for fun and entertainment around the Spokane area?
Well, we are outdoorsy folks. And one of the things I love about Spokane is its proximity to a lot of good recreational stuff. The largest state park in our state is Mount Spokane. That's not far away, and there's wonderful hiking to be had there. But the second largest state park in the state is it abuts downtown, or actually, it becomes kind of a greenbelt extension of downtown. It's Riverside State Park, and that was one of the reasons that was the deal breaker. I mean, that closed the deal for me when I came to visit Spokane. Cool community. I'm an avid mountain biker, and I was able to pop out of my hotel room, ride maybe 2 or 3 blocks on asphalt.
Okay.
Found a trail that took me from downtown to Riverside State Park, which was it's a really, really beautiful park with trails everywhere. And I stopped. I was up on a hilltop. I looked back towards downtown, and there's these towers, this cityscape set in, this bowl of green, on the hill, trees, and then just beyond those trees, there's downtown, and it's just amazing view. And I thought, you're not going to get this many places. This is something special. I had a little bit of that in Austin, but not like here. And so we're, outdoorsy folk. We like to ride the Centennial Trail and mountain bike. My wife's an avid road biker. Amazing road biking to be had south of here, all around, frankly. But as many country lanes as we have, there's plenty of places to, to just kind of get off and pedal. We run. In fact, I'm going to be doing my very first marathon in about 3 weeks.
Which one? Which marathon?
It's called the Windermere Marathon.
Where is this held at?
It's held in Spokane. It starts in Liberty Lake, just east of here, near the Idaho border. And it's a one-way. You start out there and you run back towards downtown. You finish in downtown. And it just happens to be 26 miles, 0.2.
Just happens.
Yeah.
Just happens to be.
Yeah, but it follows. It's a gorgeous course because very little of it happens along arterials or roadways at all. It happens along the Centennial Trail, which is a non-motorized route. It's like 70 miles long total. Starts in Idaho, and then goes up past Spokane towards the confluence of the Spokane and the Columbia. But it's this wonderfully quiet paved trail that follows the course of the Spokane River. So the net elevation gain is actually a negative. So you're kind of running a little bit downhill the whole way. And so it makes it, that was kind of, I thought, maybe if I'm going to do a marathon, at least I won't have to run uphill much. So yeah, that's another thing we do.
Does your wife run?
She does. Yeah.
Is she gonna do the marathon?
No, she's not. Not this time. She did the Portland Marathon a few years ago, and it was always. So
she's already done a marathon.
She's done one, and I've never done one. She was always like,
felt
like there was something over my head.
What is the furthest you've ever run so far?
I did 18 miles a couple weeks ago. That was the first I've ever run. Yeah. So we'll see. I don't know.
Okay. All right. Well, I applaud you. And I'm tired just hearing you talk about running. So it's like, I'm just like, okay. Always ask my guests, are you a coffee drinker?
I am, definitely. In fact, I get carried away with that too.
Do you?
Yes.
Well, let's explore that for a second then. What do you mean by you get carried away with that?
Well, it was one of my pandemic hobbies that I picked up was making coffee. We'd always had this espresso machine in the house. And it's like, well, it's just decent, but it's not like cafe coffee. But I don't know how I think it was YouTube. I think I discovered some videos like James Hoffman. Do you know him?
I don't know that name.
If you don't look him up. He was the world champion barista a few years back. Anyway, I discovered lever coffee machines. I have so I ended up buying a La Pavone, classic Italian, old school. This is what we mean when we're talking about pulling shots. You have a lever, and so that pushes the hot water through the bed of coffee. And it's taken a while to learn how to use the darn thing and to get good at it. But I think I'm there. So my wife and I have a latte, and I'm learning how to do my latte art. I'm getting decent at that too. So we have this every morning, and we make sure and buy beans from our local roaster, our favorite local roaster, Roast House, Deborah DiBernardo.
Okay.
Hats off to her. And so, yeah, I'm
which of Roast House I know Rose House. They're wonderful folks. What coffee from them are you buying? What do you like from them?
It's a blend. This is the part of cider, a part of coffee I'm not fluent in yet. What kind of beans, I can't tell you. But it's the blend called Epic. I think that we like the best as espresso.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah.
Yeah. Have you been to their First Avenue Coffee?
I have. Yeah, it's just right down the street from where we live. We live in downtown.
Okay, so that coffee bar, the first time I walked in there, I started looking at the equipment, and in my head I started adding up the dollars that were, and I'm like, I don't know that I've seen this much coffee equipment in one coffee shop ever.
Right.
And yeah, I love their pour over station where you can, they have all the grinders will grind for you around the spot. Oh yeah. I love going to Spokane for that reason right there. First Avenue Coffee.
Yeah. Yeah. It's awesome. They have a coffee flavor wheel, a big poster of one in the back. And so, coffee nerds go in. I'm sure they do something similar, quite similar to what we do with cider.
Yeah.
Something else to love and appreciate. And if you want to get nerdy about it, you sure can. But they do. I appreciate that about Deborah. She's serious. She's serious about her coffee, and tries to. Her ethos about coffee is real similar to, our intended approach with cider.
Okay. So next time I come to Spokane, where should I go for lunch?
You should go to. Charlotte. The ceviche place.
Oh, Chad White's.
Chad White's place, that for sure. Zona Blanca.
I have not tried that.
Zona Blanca.
Yeah.
The name Zona Blanca just blanked out of my head, but Zona Blanca. Chad White. He's one of Spokane's one of more and more really kind of, I'd say, star chefs that have taken up residence here. He was on Top Chef contestant and did quite well, but besides that star power, he's got a couple, 3 restaurants, and I think the best one is his ceviche bar called Zona Blanca.
Yeah, he has a barbecue place. He has a barbecue place, and he has the lobster roll place. Right. And he was a guest on the show before. He was a very nice guy.
Yeah. Well, I didn't know he was a guest.
And I keep meaning to go there and to try it. And every time I've gone to Spokane since then, something else has popped up and it's slipped out of my brain. And I'm going to, because that's Zona Blanca is something I've been looking forward to trying. Yeah. It wasn't opened quite when we interviewed him. It was going to be opened.
Yeah. It's open now. So yeah, you will not be disappointed. A lot of times he's behind the counter, and you can kind of wave at him if you want. I bet you've met him. You can do that now. But shoot, I mean, that's the whole deal. I mean, you can get that plate and almost always you want to take a pic, as rude as it is, you want to take a picture of it because it's just presented so well. It's just art on a plate, and then you taste it. It's just over the moon good. So that would be a good solid choice for you, Scott.
Okay. Get out of jail free question. What didn't I ask you that I should have?
I think I kind of forced my way into that discussion about the wild yeast. I'm so proud of that. I really enjoy using native yeast with our products. I think that's just a sort of a natural extension of trying to express the apple. We're expressing the yeast, the various types of yeast that have proven themselves to be durable and survive on those apples in that orchard, and then in turn are doing their part to create the cider, and that gives our cider a flavor that's even beyond the apple is unique to us, because there's yeast evolves, and yeast there's not there are definitely strains you can purchase off the shelf, but ours is a hybrid. It's something that's evolved here, and it gives you kind of a progressive, if done well, it gives you a nice progressive, character-filled complement to what the apple provides. It adds personality to a cider. It helps tell a story on your palate if you're sensitive to it, and it's something you can talk about if you want to, but you can just plain enjoy it.
Okay.
So, I'm glad you asked that because I did want to hit on that. I think that's important. I think that's one of the things that I noted when I was in France or in the UK. I have yet to make it to Spain, but you can really tell area to area how there's a characteristic to the cider there that's unique to Camembert or different parts of France that are really owing largely to that microflora that is resident there too.
Okay.
So it's kind of an amazing thing that I don't know a lot about yet, but I sure do appreciate it.
All right. Where can people find out more about Liberty Ciderworks?
Our website tells a lot of the story, what we intend and what we offer. So I would, go there, shoot. If you happen to be in Spokane, do drop by. I mean, we see our tasting room as a point of cider evangelism. I mean, it's a tasting room, but it's also a place for us to get people excited and passionate about this beverage. And so if you want to have your ear talked off, if you've got questions, and I'm there, you can have it all. Most of our staff is just almost as conversant in cider, and they can tell you all you possibly want to know and get you on the path to becoming a cider head yourself.
From a distribution standpoint, for our audience that's maybe in Western Washington, is Liberty carried anywhere in Western Washington?
It is. We do self-distribution for business reasons, but and so that limits us a little bit. But I will say there's a bunch of really fine bottle shops that I won't list off here that have us. But I think the easiest place for a Western Washington person to find us would be at PCC markets. I think there are 16, 17 of those scattered around the metro, and we're on the shelf there.
Okay.
Yeah, you'll find, I think,
Excellent. 3
or 4 of our products there, and so you can get, try one. I think you're going to be, you'll be very happy, and then you'll hopefully try more of the stuff we make, because we make a ridiculous number of ciders. I don't know of anyone that's doing as many single varietals as we are. And so you can come on the adventure with us.
All right. Well, Rick, thank you so much for taking the time to chat with me today. I enjoyed myself, and I wish you all the success in your marathon.
Thank you.
And that's just completing it will be do you have a time? Are you aiming for a time?
Yeah, I'd like to be at or under 4 hours, which I think is a 9-minute pace per mile.
Okay.
I think I can pull that off, but I've never run 26. I mean, I felt pretty good at my 18. I thought, I could keep going, but I can't believe people run 26. But it'll hopefully be me. But that's my target.
Okay. Well, best of luck on that. And again, thank you for taking the time to be here today.
Thanks for inviting me, Scott. This has been a real pleasure. It's been fun.
Join us next time for another episode of the Exploring Washington State podcast.